Hello everyone, welcome to my presentation. My topic is React Native monorepo. My name is Emily Xiong. So first, let me introduce myself. I currently live in Toronto, Canada right now, and I work for a company called Narwhal.io. So our company has this open source software called NX, which helps you to manage your monorepo. I am a developer for the library Narwhal React Native and Narwhal Expo. I like hiking, biking, kayaking, and skiing, and I'm going to run a half marathon in October this year. So here is the topic I'm going to cover today. What is monorepo and what is NX? How to create an NX monorepo, how to do unit testing, end-to-end testing, and how to add storybook to your React Native app. So here is a problem I have. For example, if my organization has multiple React Native mobile apps, they all have the common styling and they use the same components, how do I make a component library that's easily shared between all these different mobile apps? If I make change to my component library, how do I make sure all the consuming mobile app get it right away? Or this is a different problem I might have. For instance, for my organization, I have both mobile apps and web apps. I choose React Native as my mobile tech stack and the React as my web tech stack. So how do I share code between these two different tech stacks? For example, I want to share some non-UI code like state management, business logic. And I also want to have feature parity between my mobile and web app. Or this is a different problem I might have is my company has both front-end code and back-end code. They have the same interface and types. So how do I share interface and types between them? The solution I came up with is monorepo with NX. So first, what is a monorepo? I took this picture from the monorepo.tools website. It's also a website created by my company. So from the definition here, a monorepo is a single repository containing multiple distinct projects with well-defined relationship. So on the diagram here, there's a monorepo versus polyrepo. So for my monorepo, I only have one repository under my organization. And I can see all the apps and the library under it, and the apps and the library are linked. Whereas polyrepo, where all my application using the same library here. However, the library is in its own repo, and all the application around it, they are in their different distinct repo as well. So there are definitely many monorepo tools out there that help you to manage the different apps and libraries for you. So they're all listed here. So what is NX? I also took this picture from NX website. So NX is smart, fast, and extensible build system. So all these are pretty big words, right? And it sounds good. But what does it do for me as a developer then? So why would I choose NX over other monorepo tools? So as a developer, I don't need to make additional configuration for unit testing, linting, and E2E testing. It will set up them for me out of the box. So I can start to write a code and start writing the React Native code right away, rather than worry about configuration. It also have this feature called Dependency graph, where this shows you an interactive tool that allows you to see the relationship between all your applications and the libraries. So as the monorepo getting too big, as a developer, I would definitely worry about the speed, right? So how long would it take me to rebuild the entire workspace? So NX has this feature called computational caching, where if you make no change to your library application, you will retrieve the build from the cache rather than execute that rebuild task. So it definitely saves us a developer quite some time, provide us with fast build time. Same goes for unit testing and linting as well. So if you make no change in the code and you try to run the unit test or linting on your entire workspace, you retrieve the task result from the cache rather than execute it. And it's pretty easy to share code. So let's create an NX workspace. Here, remember this problem we have? So in this example, we're going to create 2 mobile apps and make sure they share the same component library. So first, let's create an NX workspace. So in my terminal, enter the command npx create NX workspace as latest. So for my workspace name, I'm going to name it React Native EU. I'm going to use it with React Native. And I'm going to name my application mobile 1 here. So after installation is done, if you open your workspace in your code editor, you will see under the workspace root, I have apps folder and library folders here. If I expand my apps folder, I can see the mobile 1 application just created. If I expand the mobile 1, I should see Android folder, apps folder, source folder, which is the exact same structure of one single React Native app. So now we have one application in my workspace. Let's add another application. So I can, using through command nx generate now React Native application followed by your application name. So if you use Visual Studio Code, there's an extension you could install here called NX Console. So it's a UI for NX. So instead of using the terminal and the run commands, you could use NX Console to generate now React Native application. And for my application name, I can just enter mobile 2 and click the run button here. So to run your application in the simulator or device, for Android, enter NX run Android followed by your application name. So in this case, it launches in the Android emulator. For iOS, enter NX run iOS followed by your application name here. So now we have 2 applications inside our workspace. Now let's create a shared library. So you can create in the NX console. So NX generate now React Native library. So followed by my library name. I'm going to use UI components here as my library name. And I click run button. Or you can use terminal and run the command here. NX generate now React Native library followed by my library name. So now if you go to your workspace, under apps, you can see the 2 applications we create, mobile 1 and mobile 2 here. Under libraries, you can see the UI component library we just created. However, there's nothing linked among them. So I can open my dependency graph by entering NX graph. And you should launch the website showing my dependency graph. Notice these 3 are kind of standalone, so they have nothing in common yet. So now let's create a component that could be shared. So I can do it inside NX console or generate now a React Native component. I'm going to name this component button, and I'm going to list it under UI components library and click run here. Or I can use terminal where I can enter NX generate now React Native component followed by the component name button -- project equals to the UI components library -- export, where with this flag I can export the button files inside of index.ts here. So now I can see that under UI components source library, there's a button folder created, and inside it has a button component under the unit test. So I can use this button component anywhere inside my mobile 1 and mobile 2 using this import statement. So import button from the workspace name, so React Native EU followed by the library name, UI components. So if I use this import inside my mobile 1 app application and mobile 2 application, and I run the dependency graph again, I will see something like this, where mobile 1 and mobile 2 all imports from UI components library. So now we solve problem 1, where we have multiple mobile apps that can share component library. So here's another example we might have. So under my workspace, I have applications that use different tech stack then. And for instance, my mobile use React Native and my web use React. How do I share something like same management or business logic code? So I do have this example under my GitHub. It's called Studio Ghibli Search Engine. So Studio Ghibli is a Japanese animation studio. So my application, it allows you to search any films and characters created by this studio. So here are the libraries I use, which are complete to different tech stack as I mentioned. So I use different material libraries for these two applications here, and all the other libraries as well. So if I run a dependency graph, it currently looks like this. So I have web and mobile, and they all share the 3 libraries. So store is for the state management, service is calling the backend API, and the model is interfaces and types here. So to run it on the mobile device, I can just run nx run Android, then my mobile app, and the nx run iOS, then my mobile app here. So it launches my mobile app in the simulator or device. To launch the web app here, inside my workspace, I can just enter nx serve followed by my web app name. So Studio Ghibli Search Engine Web. So this should launches my website inside the browser. So now we know how to create apps and libraries inside our workspace. As a developer, we all know that writing the application code is only half of the job. So the other half is testing. So let's see, how do we do unit tests? So this is the unit testing library that we're going to use. For NX, these libraries are going to all installed for you as default, so you don't need to worry about installation and configuration. So we're going to use Jest testing library, Jest Native, and testing library React Native. To run your unit test, in terminal, enter NX test followed by your application name or library name. So for my case, I can enter NX test Studio Ghibli Search Engine Mobile here, and then you will pick up all the specs files. So any file has .specs, .tsx in it, and then you run all the unit tests and show my unit test results here. So for the NX test command, you can also pass flags in. So the flag I use pretty often is watch flag, where every time you make a change, you will rerun the unit test in the background. So it's pretty useful if you're doing test-driven development. There's other flags you can pass in with NX test. So I'll put a link here. So if you generate your component using the NX generate now React Native component, you will notice there's already a .spec file created for you. So this is the .spec file looks like. So I do have an example comparing a React unit test with React Native unit test on the right. So they are kind of similar. So this is a simple component where it's just a loading spinner here. It doesn't have any props. So for my component, I'm just going to render it and check whether it renders successfully. So on the React unit test, it import the render function from testing library React, whereas React Native, you use the render function from testing library React Native. So this is a default unit test that's going to be created for you. So unit testing only testing the JavaScript logic for components only. So how about E2E testing? So for E2E testing, you will notice that for every application, there's a different folder ending with -E2E create right beside it, right? So inside that E2E folder, it's going to use Detox as the framework for unit test for E2E testing. So what is Detox? Detox is a gray box end-to-end testing and automation library for mobile apps. So it's similar to Cypress before. So Cypress is for the web application, and they have somewhat similar syntax. So it's Detox and Cypress. The test runner I'm going to use is Jest, and if you need to set up Detox with iOS environment on your MacBook, you still have to install app-sim-utils library here. So how do you run E2E tests? On one terminal, enter nx followed by your application name. So this will start the JS server here. And on the other terminal, you can just run nx test iOS and nx test Android followed by the E2E folder name. So nx test iOS, your application name -E2E will run the E2E test on the iOS simulator device. nx test Android, your application name -E2E will run your end-to-end test on the Android simulator device. So how do I write the E2E test? I have an example here. So this is the E2E flow I got. So on the search input, I want to enter the text total row here, and I click the search button. So it should redirect me to the results page where it shows me a list of films and characters related to this one. So I click the first item in the list, and it shows me the movie detail where it showing me my neighbor Totoro movie. So I need to write the E2E test for this flow. So I do have a code snippet here. So first you wait for the search page to be visible. Then you get the ID of search input, clear text, and enter Totoro inside the search input. Then you get search button and tap on the search button. Then it goes to the results page. And I want to get the first item of the result list item here. And I click that one. It should redirect me to the film page. And I get the title on the film page, and it should equals to my title, my neighbor Totoro. So this is a code snippet of the Detox E2E test. Last, I want to talk about storybook. So what is storybook? It's for UI development, testing, and documentation. So for storybook, it's pure presentational. We're going to pass some mock data into the storybook. So the component is pure, does not have any state, and does not call any API or backend. And the library I'm going to use is Storybook React Native. So how do you add Storybook to your application? You can run this command, and next generate now React Native Storybook configuration followed by your application name. So for this case, I'm just going to generate Storybook to my application Studio Ghibli Search Engine Mobile, and I'm going to choose yes to add .stories.ts file beside my components here. So after you run that command, you should see there's 3 folders created for you. So on the workspace rule, there's a .storybook folder. Inside your application, there's also .storybook folder. Also under source, there's a storybook folder as well. So how do you run the storybook? First, in the terminal, enter NX storybook followed by application name here. Then you should start your application like you normally run your app. So after you launch your application, either using run Android or run iOS, and launches in the Android emulator device or iOS emulator device, then you have to open the debug menu and choose the last item in your debug menu. So toggle storybook here. So this is what you see. So notice it has a menu on the bottom. So click navigator, you should see your navigation list of different stories. And you can click the stories here and it shows you the detail of that component. So this is what those stories file look like. So I want to create a story for my film card component here. So I want to show primary, and I'm going to pass some mock data into this film card component. So if you open your storybook here, you should see the film card primary and click it. It shows you the film card with the mock data you passed in. So that is the end of my presentation. I know I went through a lot today, so if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. You can reach through my Twitter, where it's pretty easy to remember. Just my last name Xiong followed by my first name Emily. You can also reach me at Network Community Slack here. So thank you for listening.